For the second time in less than a week, lawmakers gathered on Capitol Hill for a hearing on the measles outbreak. 4 doctors faced questions from senators over the dangers of online misinformation that pushes parents away from potentially life-saving vaccinations. Federal data suggests the number of children under 2 not being immunized has quadrupled since 2001. But the person grabbing the most headlines wasn't a doctor, but a high school senior. Ethan Lindenberger went against his parents' wishes and got vaccinated when he turned 18. He explained his mother's logic for opposing vaccines.
In one such instance where I approached my mother with information from the CDC that claimed vaccines do not cause autism, she responded with, "That's what they want you to think." Skepticism and worry were taking the forefront in terms of information.
The hearing comes as a new study says there is no link between the measles vaccine and autism. Danish researchers analyzed data from more than 650,000 children. Less than 1% of those who received the MMR vaccine were later diagnosed with autism. That was echoed by the 4 experts Tuesday.
In your opinion, there's no evidence, reputable evidence, that vaccines cause autism?
There is absolutely no evidence at this time that vaccines cause autism.
Dr. Omer, do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Dr. Weissman, do you agree with that?
I do.
Mr. Boyle, do you agree with that?
I do.
Mr. Lindenberger?
I do.
Joining me now is Indiana Republican Senator Mike Braun, who sits on the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee that held the hearing. Senator, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
So, Senator, after today's hearing, what is your message for parents with vaccination-aged children?
Well, that's a serious topic everywhere, and I think for me it would mean that parents, call that shot, and I know there's a wide variety. I actually, during that hearing, was chairing a subcommittee hearing in Environment and Public Works, so I wasn't in on much of it, but it's a big issue, and with the kind of rise in measles occurrence again, I think we got to be careful. So I'm, though, a firm believer that, parents kind of guide the choice there.
Well, your colleague from Kentucky, Senator Rand Paul, said he does not, quote, favor giving up on liberty for a false sense of security. What's your response to that?
Well, that would be a little more philosophical approach than probably what I'd take, but I think Rand does have a point there. I think if anything, in terms of a vaccination, was foolproof, 100% effective, that wouldn't make sense. And most vaccines are, so that's why I think it's a real tricky issue. But I think nobody's better to make that decision than the parents themselves.
On another topic, you are introducing some new legislation that seeks to combat increasing prescription drug prices. What can you tell us about that?
Well, about 10 years ago, I got fed up with healthcare costs in general. And in my own company, which had about 300 employees at the time, I did what most others don't try to do. I took on the health insurance companies to lower costs, make it sustainable, and thank goodness I did it there, and we had good luck, but it's even got worse since then. So we were able to find a way to make it consumer-driven, emphasize wellness, have our employees have some skin in the game, cut costs out of the gate, and have not had a premium increase in 9 years now. So there's a lot that needs to be done. And what I did, starting with these 3 bills, making it more transparent when it comes to buying drugs or getting a prescription filled, is just starting the conversation. We've got to make sure the industry starts to get involved if it wants to save itself from being a one-payer system.
Well, Senator, as we mentioned, you sit on the Senate Help Committee, which oversees nominations for the Food and Drug Administration, and the agency's chief, Scott Gottlieb, announced his resignation today. What is your reaction, and do you think the agency needs a new direction?
Well, I was surprised to hear that. That actually got that news when I was doing an interview on rolling out these 3 bills. I think that the administration is trying to take the point of view to where we disrupt the status quo. And I don't think there are too many people I've bumped into here that are happy with the trajectory of healthcare costs. So whether, I think he did a good job while he was here. I think we'll find somebody else to come in and carry the torch. But we've got to get the industry involved in being transparent, in embracing competition, and doing things differently from what they've been doing, or they're going to be part of a one-payer system. The other side, is talking about Medicare for all.
So the Senate, as you know, is expected to vote in the coming days to block President Trump's national emergency declaration. You've supported the declaration, but a few days ago you told the Associated Press that it causes, quote, a little bit of heartburn. Does President Trump need to adjust his tactics, you think?
I think he's probably set on that course, and I think the fact that, in my mind, it is an emergency, it is a crisis at our southern border. He campaigned on it. And most Democrats very recently were for a lot more in terms of border barriers and resources. So I think they're calculating it politically. And I think the president's dead set on at least getting something done. He promised voters he'd do it. I don't like the idea of when any one of our branches would get too declarative or out there. So the emergency, I think it's an emergency. Using it as a declaration here, I had a little heartburn with it, but I'm going to be with the president to do it.
Well, your Republican Senate colleague, Tennessee's Lamar Alexander, is urging the president to find other sources of funding and withdraw his national emergency. Do you see any other ways for the president to find funding?
Well, I think, first of all, this is going to be more than just a year. So whatever we do, this is going to happen again years down the road. And I think I'd love to see the Democrats, what they come up with when it comes for smart technology. Would they be willing to spend the money there? So there are going to be a whole lot of different methods used to secure the border. This is just the start of it.
Well, what message has the White House been delivering behind closed doors to your reluctant colleagues in Congress? And if you need to grab a drink of water, Senator, I understand. Please feel free to do that.
No, I think what the president's trying to do is simply make sure that everybody stays within the fold to where he can do this year what he wants to do. And even though it might not line up perfectly with all the different angles you can take at looking at this subject, even though it might give some of us heartburn that you got to use an emergency declaration to do it, I think it's important that he does stick with it, because it was the primary centerpiece of, what he ran on in 2016.
Finally, you mentioned your seat on the Senate Committee on Environment. Some of your Democratic colleagues are promoting the Green New Deal plan to overhaul the nation's economy to make it more ecologically sustainable. What is your view on the Green New Deal?
Well, I think that when it's laid out like it is, with the complete disconnect with reality, I mean, when you want to make our environment cleaner over time, I think there's a certain way to do it. I think it completely gives no credit to the strides we've made over the last 2 or 3 decades. And I think that when you take the components of it, of eliminating fossil fuels, of emphasizing train travel, some of it saying you don't fly, that doesn't make sense. I think that actually hurts the cause of incrementally, within our ability to do it, to do things that benefit the environment. I know I'm one that wants clean air, clean water. I want to take care of the environment. I also want to be able to do it in the context of, can we do it as a federal government? Until we get our house in order here with our budget, quit running trillion-dollar deficits, we're going to have a hard time doing anything we believe in.
What's your sense on a time frame, though? How urgent is this problem of helping the environment?
I think all of this has been out there for decades. I think we've made great progress when it comes to cleaner air, cleaner water. I believe that you need to have regulations in place to do it. This rush to something like the Green New Deal, I think, just becomes political fodder for the folks that put it out there that may hurt them because it's got so many preposterous components to it.
All right, so I'm afraid we're out of time. Indiana Republican Senator Mike Braun. Senator, thanks very much for your time.
Hey, you're welcome.